Following the success of Game of Thrones came House of the Dragon. After House of the Dragon, we have A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. At one point, the world of Westeros was home to the greatest television show ever. Of course, I'm speaking about Game of Thrones. But then we saw how that ended. And then we got House of the Dragon, which is a very mixed bag. And then we were given A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. When I first heard about this, I sort of dismissed it, I'm going to be honest. Sort of dismissed it. I think because right before that was House of the Dragon, I kind of thought it was mixed. Didn't expect much from a story of a knight, and then I watched it. And man, this is an excellent show. It follows a hedge knight in Westeros. You know, they're called hedge knights because they sleep by the hedges. Basically the most humble of knights, right? I mean that where they come from. But character-wise, our lead protagonist, Duncan, the tall, very tall dude, is also very humble. You know, he gives off a little bit of an aloof personality, a little bit of naivety as to what's going on around him. But what makes him so great is his intentions are true and his intentions are for good, right? He has high standards for not just himself, but for knights in general, right? You know, here's this guy who expects a knight to be good, right? Not in sword fighting, but in character, right? He expects a knight to be an example. He expects a knight to help the poor. He expects a knight to help the needy and to answer the call to evil, against evil, right? And because he expects that, that's what he himself always is ready for. That's what he carries in his heart. And in a world that delivers countless amounts of grayness and characters, countless amounts of ambiguity to characters' intentions, characters that are our protagonists, but they have evil in them, or characters that are not good intention, characters that are selfish, things like this. This was a breath of fresh air because he's in a world where, yes, all of that is there, but he's that 1% that is good. He's good-hearted. And because of that, you just root for him. You root for him because that's what he strives for. You root for him because it feels pure, right? In a world that is anything but. So the story follows Duncan, and on his way to the tournament, he meets his little kid. His name is Egg. The story is about Duncan and Egg. It's their story. You know, he's this little kid who wants to be a squire. He meets him. He's a stables boy. He's just in charge of the horses. He tells me, you know, can I be your squire? And as the story plays along, and I'm trying to avoid spoilers here, as the story plays, things get revealed, right? There's plot twists, there's revelations, and a great, exciting, and excellent show. I highly recommend this show. First 2 episodes, they build you up a little bit slower, you know, a lot more exposition. If you get to the end of the 3rd episode and you're not hooked, maybe the show's not for you, right? But that 3rd episode does such a great job of just fully reeling you into the story that you're going to have to see the story through. And of course, this is HBO Max. Be aware that this is a very adult show. Now, I'm going to talk spoilers. I loved the practical effects in the story. I loved the setting, the on-set location, the production. I watched so many behind the scenes. They put so much effort into this show, and there was very little to no green screen, right? But they built this town where like most of the story takes place. They built the stables, they built the place where they joust, they built the arena where they have the trial of the 7. That's great effort, and you love to see it. You love to see it in movies and shows that people are still going for practicality and that it is being rewarded, whether through viewership or critical praise or audience praise. That's a good thing. The cinematography and camera work is great. You know, when you get to the trial of 7, you have insane camera work. You know, you get a POV shot of Dunk. You even see like the lines of the helmet, so you can barely see anything, and it just puts you into his perspective. All hell breaks loose around him. People are being stabbed. They're falling off horses. All of a sudden, he gets stabbed and you're in the POV shot, right? But for the whole show, technically nothing is weak. Nothing is weak. The sound, the camera work, the production, the costume, and I know that they had a lower budget than they did in Game of Thrones for this show. And that's sometimes for the better. Sometimes you need to have less in order to do more because it's demanded of you. And you really see that in the show. And moving on to Egg, great acting performance by Dexter. This is, man, it's a child actor who understands so much of what adult actors don't, right? That stillness, but he has by default a very warm, very loving appearance, right? But then you start getting to the later episodes and you have this intensity, you have this internal struggle that Dexter, the actor who plays Egg, is just really able to portray. He's going to do great things, man. He keeps this up. He's going to do great things if he wants to continue to do it. And what I love about Egg is as a character, he's smart, he's intelligent, he helps our protagonist. A lot of times children characters and stories really hinder the protagonist. They hold them back, they make mistakes, and then they learn. No, in this story, Egg is very much a supporting character, coming in a lot of times, saving Dunk. Dunk saves him. And you can really just tell that they are supporting characters to each other, right? He's acted amazingly. The actor who plays Duncan, he used to be a rugby player. So this guy's huge. He's big. He's tall. He plays this gentle giant. And you think it's like an easy task, but no, this job of his demands a lot of emotional performance, and especially in the later episodes where you don't just have Duncan walking around and reacting to mildly amusing situations around him, but where you have him holding someone who's dying, him having an internal struggle with himself, him at the brinks of death, him in an intense rage, and somehow the showrunner still was able to manage humor into the story that worked well. When you have episode 1 and then Duncan meets Egg and they walk through the campsites and everything, you could tell, this is a come-up story, right? It feels very Rocky-esque. Something that's great about Rocky, he's the underdog. By default, we want to root for the underdog, but I feel like it just adds so much more that Duncan is capable of being rooted for, like his character. Something you don't see very often, right? And then Egg, again, just seemingly just wanting to be a squire. He wants that humble life. And they are complex. These are complex characters. You get to episode 2, you start seeing the tournament. Dunk is asking for basically someone to vouch for him, right? That way he could be in the tournament. And he asks everyone, all the lords there, like, do any of you know Sir Arlen of Penetry, who was his mentor and essentially his guardian, right? Duncan was an orphan. And they're like, no, I didn't know him. And he tells them, like, but he fought with you, this and that. And they don't remember, right? They don't remember because they don't care, or because he was simply in a battle where there were so many soldiers, right? But long story short, they basically all just push him away. You're introduced to Baelor Targaryen and Maegor Targaryen. One is grumpier. You could tell he's got a lot of pent-up anger, which is Maegor, and the calmer one, who's the next in line to be king, is Baelor. But at the end of episode 2, after going through so many lords, asking them if they remember his mentor, if they remember Sir Arlen of Penetry, over and over being told no, right? One would think, and a lot of people thought, like, oh, so he's starting to realize his mentor, his guardian, his master wasn't what he said he was. And the episode, it's coming to an end, and Duncan is talking to Egg, and he's like saying, nobody knows him. No one remembers my mentor. And the direction that they went says a lot about Duncan, because he didn't say, well, then, I don't believe my master. Then he didn't question his master. He didn't question all the stories he told him because they were all true. And he knew it in his heart. But what he says is, after getting approved by Baelor, Baelor Targaryen, and being vouched by him, that way he could be in the tournament. He knows tomorrow, the day after in the story, he's gonna be jousting. He's gonna be fighting, right? And he says to Egg, nobody knows my master. On the morrow, is what they say in the show. On the morrow, I'll show them what his hand has wrought. And that just hyped me up. And I love that. I love that. Essentially saying, I'll show them. I'll show them who he was. Through me, I will show them. Right? I'll show them his greatness through me. Because I am his legacy. That's what I loved. In episode 3, you have Duncan and Egg. And they have the really nice talk. Basically, Egg saying, once you're a knight, once you win, this and that, can I be your squire? He tells him that he would just love to live in a farm, in a rural place, surrounded by trees, surrounded by nature. Keep in mind, Egg as a kid wants a peaceful, quiet life. And that's important because it adds to the complexity that they've decided to go with him. Fast forward to later in the episode, and it was a huge thing. We have the Targaryens come in. Nobody really likes him. One of the brats, I should say, his name is Aerion Targaryen. He sees one of the puppet shows. He sees that it's a puppet show. She is someone that Duncan had met earlier. She's basically friends with Duncan. And she's a puppet master, right? And the puppet show is a knight killing a dragon. So he walks up to it, and you're like, oh, shoot. In the meantime, Dunk is with Raymond, and he's called over, and it's a really cool, just tracking shot of Dunk. Adds to the chaoticness, and you zoom in. Arion and his guards have destroyed the puppet tent. He breaks her finger, and Dunk lets loose, right? All he sees is red. So he's huge. He pushes 2 to 3 guards out of the way. He punches them. He grabs Arion and ragdolls him off her, and then he punches him. Aerion tries to get up, pulls out his knife. Dunk, bam, kicks him in the face. It takes 3 guys to handle Dunk, right? And just before he's curb stomped, Egg shouts, and he tells him to stop. Dunk looks at him and is he tells him, you stupid boy, get away from here. He's trying to protect Egg. And Dunk tells him, they're gonna hurt you. Egg says, no, they're not, because if they do, they have to answer to my father. You're like, who's your father? And he looks, and Arion, bloodied mouth and everything. He says, what happened to your hair? As if he's familiar with Egg. And Egg says, mind you, Egg throughout all of this is bald. And the word of Game of Thrones and Westeros, Targaryens, the royalty, the kings and princes of Westeros who have the most money, the most power, notoriously have white hair. So Egg throughout all of this has shaved his head, right? He tells him, I shaved it. I didn't want to look like you. And then the music plays and you're like revelation. A really cool plot twist. Going back to the complexity. Here's this character, he's a little kid. You do something simple with him, but no, you make it complex and you make it relatable. And what is this decision? What did it cost? A lot of times we're told in writing, make sure that a decision costs something. What did it cost Egg to stand up for Dunk? It cost him essentially the future that he wanted. Because throughout all of this, he's hiding from his family. He doesn't want to be a prince. If he says anything, if he puts himself out there, then they're not going to ever let him basically leave again, right? And they're going to force him into the responsibilities, into the life of a prince, right? And standing up for Dunk, he gives up something that he really deeply cares about, but he cares more for his friend. And then the next episode is great. And then episode 4, great little moments here, when he's talking to Baelor. He's going back and forth with him. Baelor told him, you should have never touched a dragon. You should have never touched a Targaryen. And Duncan debates him, would you have done it? He says, yes, but I'm a prince, right? And Duncan says, but don't all knights make the same vows to protect the innocent, right? To fight evil. Don't we all make the same vows? And that's the wholesomeness, that's the purity that I'm talking about, because in that moment, Baelor also sees he's a good man. Duncan is a good man. He has great intentions. and he's very rare, very special as well. And what he sort of brought up to the Targaryen council, something I liked is that Aerion, he's not dumb. In the last episode, Dunk just ragdolled him. Aerion is not going to do a one-on-one. What does he do? He calls on the trial of 7. And what is that? That's when you get 7 on your side, including yourself, versus 7 on the defending side, right? Accusers get 7 total. Defenders get 7 total, right? Within a day, they have to fight, right? And Duncan says, but I don't know anybody. It's true, he doesn't know anybody. He's a hedge knight. And Aerion just pushes back. Well, if the cause is just, people will stand up for you, which is insane, right? Up to this point, you have some people in mind, like the Baratheon, which was acted great. I think he said that Daniel Ings acted as him. He was trying to be a little bit Jack Sparrow-y. You could feel that. I wish we got a little bit more depth with him, but I still really like the scenes that he was in. And then you think about Raymond Fossaway. Okay, so these two can be with Dunk. I don't know about anybody else. And that's where Lil Egg comes in and helps out, right? He helps build that for Dunk. And in this episode, it's just great. Like, one of my favorite moments in the show is the twist that the Fossaway, he ends up going to the other side, right? And Duncan is left with 6 against 7. Aerion, for the most part, has Kingsguard. People that are, in general, it's their job to protect princes and kings. Dunk has his makeshift, people that he's met, people that are good fighters, people that Egg knows are good knights. He's called them over, but he's missing one. And one of my favorite scenes is as he riding the horse, it's like a really cool slow motion shot. Heading over to the stands, he asks for permission to speak. And in the meantime, Raymond is being knighted by Baratheon. It's like really nice cinematography. We just get like a really profound, great storytelling moment. And it sent, chills. Great delivery, this speech, calling on anybody to fight for the innocent. He's daring the crowd also, come fight for me, come fight for good. What does he tell them? Has courage deserted the lords of Westeros? I don't know where this is going. And out of nowhere, the Game of Thrones soundtrack starts playing. And you're like, wait, what's about to happen? A knight, fully armored, comes in. By the way, the armor is excellent. Very characteristic of each person in each house, right? Comes in, and this person comes in on top of the horse. You're like, who is this? Boom! Takes off helmet. You realize it's Baelor Targaryen. The guy who's calm, the guy who's intelligent, who's very poised and composed, who's fighting against blood. He knows his nephew is a jerk. He knows his nephew is a brat. He's deciding to fight for good versus fighting for his family, for his blood. Who he knows is standing for the wrong things, right? Why is this so significant? Because Baelor is the next in line. He's the next in line to be king. He's put himself in immense danger for good, for Dunk. And then we have the best episode of the series, the best episode so far, the Trial of 7. Immediate intensity, right? But first, you do get a little bit of emotional weight to everything. Egg looks at Dunk and Dunk says the same thing. He could read the worry in Egg's face. And he makes a callback to when they first met. And that kind of makes Egg smile, but then his smile quickly disappears, just reminded of the danger his friend is in. Egg goes to the stands. Dunk is basically breathing extremely hard. And boom, everyone goes. Dunk's horse is there. Oh man, it's a great episode, like greatly edited, really well edited to make it very intense. And the sound editing, man. The sound, that was so great, making Egg's voice just pick up louder and louder and louder, and eventually we cut and it's the horse, boom, Dunk's horse just charging forward, and out of nowhere you get into the POV of Dunk, right? And you see how little he can see, and then boom, he gets stabbed, knocked to the floor, cut. Now we're in a flashback. And we get to see a little bit of Dunk's origin. We get to see how he met Sir Arlen of Pennytree and how Sir Arlen stood up for him and basically killed people that were going to kill Dunk. He was a kid. And without asking for anything in return, he just saves his life. He fights for the innocent. That's what you're called to do as a knight. And he follows Sir Arlen. And out of nowhere, he's just kind of like passed out. Right? Sir Arlen notices that this boy has been following him for days after not really knowing. And he looks at him, and we're at the POV of Dunk looking up. And again, great sound editing. Get up, he tells him. He tells Dunk, get up. That was, again, just sent chills down my spine, and boom, cut. Now we're back in the Trial of 7 where we stay for the rest of the episode. No music, just rawness, chaoticness. Really get the gritty feel of what it means to fight here. There's no swordplay. It feels like very little choreography. It feels like people are just trying to survive, right? And I love the way that they did this because you can tell Dunk is not the best fighter. Arion is much more experienced fighter. He's stabbing Dunk. I believe he stabs his eye at one point, and Dunk takes off his helmet, full bloodied, stabbed, and Dunk's strength is his strength, right? Like, boom, hits him. You could tell like that can break a wrist. But Arion parries back, and boom, again. And then in the third swing, I believe it's the third swing, Dunk gets him between the legs, right? Dunk kind of gets knocked back. And he's kind of just there. In the meantime, in the background, Magar, Arion's father, who's also very important royally, is fighting for his son and is trying to get to his son, seeing that his son is in a lot of danger. And who's pushing him back and holding him back and distracting him as best as they can is Baratheon and Baelor, Magar's brother. So here you have brothers, family against family. It's outstanding work. I mean, I'm talking so much about it because I really do love it. And Dunk seemingly dies for a little bit. He just completely collapses, blood coming out of his mouth, blood everywhere. He's stabbed, right? And in the meantime, Egg is just telling him, get up, get up, get up. And out of nowhere, he shouts it, get up. And then it cuts to Arlen saying, get up. Boom! Gets him up. Oh man, I'm talking so much about this because I just loved it. It hyped me up. It felt very Rocky-esque. And when Dunk gets up, he goes to town. And this is something that George R. Martin wrote. Arion could beat Duncan the Tall, but he could not beat Duncan from Flea Bottom. And the way that they showed that, they illustrated that, was perfect. No swords, no shields. Just a full-on brawl in the mud, fighting to survive. He could not beat Duncan from that. There, on the mud, is where Duncan wins, essentially is what we're being told. And he does. Just beating Arion to a pulp. And again, just adding a little bit of character to Duncan. He could have killed him then and there. He would have been in the right to do it. But he shows mercy in the middle of rage, which is extremely hard to do. And he yells, yield. Again, the sound editing, amazing. Because the first time you hear yield, it's all muffled. All of these punches are muffled. And then you hear it again, he's shouting yield. And you could tell the top of the stands can hear it. Arion says, I yield. Duncan looks around, everyone's still fighting. Because Arion just said it to him. And Duncan literally drags him, picks him up, and he shouts, say it again. And Arion says, I yield, but for everyone to hear. I yield, I yield. And then they stop. A horn is blown, they stop, cut. Duncan is being seen to his wounds, to everything right after the battle. And he says, one moment I feel drunk, the next like I'm dying. Right? Yeah, I think he did die for a little bit. And then out of nowhere, Baelor comes with his helmet and everything, saves his life. Again, he tells him to use wine, not to use oil, I believe is what he says. So just correcting them. And he tells him, I'll have my doctors, essentially, right, in Westeros, scepters, I believe is what they're called. Take a look at Dunk. Dunk kneels and he says, I'm your man forever. Right? And then Baelor picks him up and he says, we need good men. All very emotional, right? You really feel like we won this one. We won this battle. But in true Game of Thrones essence, it was not without cost. And Baylor starts tripping, and I could tell, oh, this is not good. What happened is he was hit in the back of his head by his brother, but it was so bad that it caused the helmet to go in. And Duncan holds him as Baylor is dying. The next in line, and he says, "I'm sorry." And it's just great acting, man. Oh, what a great episode. Outstanding. Excellent episode. The type of episodes and overall the type of stories that people talk about for years and just want to show to other people. And then the last episode, my favorite moments were overall like the dilemma that Duncan is going through. He says, "I don't want anything to do with Princess anymore." He tells Egg that. Egg wants to still be his squire. Egg wants to go with him everywhere. And this is the most interesting aspect, and I think very interesting thematically. Darion, the drunken prince, older brother to Egg, not the evil prince per se, that's Arion. He tells Dunk, he used to be a glad kid once. Dunk is like, Egg is a happy kid. Darion says, no, I'm talking about Arion, who's been the cause of all of these problems, who's been so mischievous and so evil, insinuating that Egg needs this. Egg needs Dunk's mentorship. He needs the humble lifestyle. He needs to be away from his family. He needs to be away from that duty that he doesn't need to carry yet, because right now he's still a kid, right? And if he's with Dunk, Dunk can teach him the right things and the things that matter, the things that Dunk knows is what will keep you true to your character and true at heart. That's overall just very interesting to me. The show is, of course, just talking about good versus evil, but it's also talking about mentorship and humility and how that really stands above all else. But also about, caring for the next generation. Duncan didn't, at the very end, he does let Egg go with him. Duncan didn't have to do that, right? But it's a responsibility that even he knew. Okay, like Egg, for the sake of Egg, like he needs this. He needs a good mentor. He needs that humility. And I think overall it's just a really interesting thing to explore. And they did that throughout the series really, really well. Overall, this is a show I'll be talking for a long time. Excellent in everything. I can't really think of a fault right now, other than the first 2 episodes being a bit too weak when it comes to engagement level for me. Compared to the rest, right? Because they are still good episodes, but just compared to the rest. But man, this is an easy A+ for me. I'm a big fan of the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I highly recommend this. And overall, having a hero on screen like Dunk is great to see. So now, my parental advisory section is coming up. This is obviously filled with spoilers. There is a lot of violence throughout the show, especially in the 5th episode. But even in episodes before that, if there is violence, it is very gory. Sometimes you have like an eyeball sticking out. Sometimes you have a very intense stabbing. Sometimes, very few times, you might cut away from something very ugly. Like if they have to, because a horse is injured, they might have to execute the horse. They'll cut away from that. Mainly because of episode 5, it is a very gory, very violent show. Keep that in mind. As far as sex and nudity, no sex. There is nudity that honestly could have been avoided. It was unnecessary. There is nudity in the 1st and 2nd episode. The beginning of the 2nd episode, extremely provocative. It's full frontal nude of a man. Very briefly of this old man at the beginning of the 2nd episode. In the middle of the 1st episode, I believe there is nudity of a woman, frontal. Very briefly, Dunk walks into this tent and he didn't realize certain things. In the very beginning of the 1st episode, you do see the back rear nudity of Sir Duncan, right? So just keep that in mind. A lot of cursing, a lot of foul language. There's no witchcraft. There is a prophecy that's told to Dunk and Egg, and I think the 3rd episode. And yeah, that's about it. Overall, very happy with this show. As you can tell, I think this might be one of my longer videos, but I'll put it out there. Let me know what you guys thought about A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. What is your favorite episode? And who's your favorite character, man? Please let me know. God bless. Have a great day. Bye-bye.